Okay, so let's get into the power of data. 4 steps to drive investor engagement. That's the last time I want to say that. I've said it 3 times already. So a little bit about ProFundCom. We've been going more than 20 years now, and we work primarily with hedge funds, asset managers, and help them use marketing automation to raise assets and preserve assets. Obviously, there's one thing about raising money, but obviously the IR team need to think about preserving money as well and engaging with investors. So we're on both sides of that equation. So the one thing we do as well was providing a technology platform. We also write out quarterly reports where we talk about the state of digital marketing within hedge funds, asset management and the like. We build reports where we do benchmarking, measuring the digital, we do digital reviews of hedge funds. We talk about steps that you can do to improve your marketing, all available on our mailing list or on our website, or if you're a customer, you should be getting this in the post. The latest report we've actually released today is the result of the survey that we ran around. We asked a whole raft of fund marketing teams in the finance space what the challenges were for 2025, and we've collated a report on this that's, again, is available on our website and will be distributed, as I mentioned earlier, to our mailing list. The really interesting takeaway from this is that, and no surprises here, 90% of the respondents were all about how can we generate more leads. And that just kind of dovetails really into what we're going to talk about today. So what we're going to talk about today is really how does data give you an advantage? How do you understand your audience? What steps do you need to do to personalize your marketing? And ultimately, how are you going to measure your success? Now, where this all works and where this all fails, I think, today, again, I do speak to lots of people. My day is about speaking to people. Spoke to somebody from one of the very large fund marketing groups, and it was all about saying, unless you've got a structure in place, you can't ask the question, we went to this event in Miami, what did we get from it? And that is really not the question to ask. The real question where marketing works and where what I talk about works is all around building out a go-to-market strategy. And I know that when people use the term GTM, I've always said, if there's one thing you do, and if you want to jump off this webinar right now, the one thing to take away from this webinar is making sure you've got a great go-to-market plan, and that your go-to-market plan is bought into by your C-suite, by your CIO, by your CEO. Because what this is all about, it's not just about, oh, I want to have a great website. It's about creating a fun narrative, doing brand awareness, creating demand, measuring engagement, and tracking analytics. It's just putting these all together is really what builds out go-to-market strategy that then feeds into what marketing automation does, what email marketing does, and the like. So these are really, really key. And once you've kind of built these out, it doesn't require any money, by the way. It's just planning. It's then about creating content and analyzing what's working, and then doing that on an iterative basis. And why this is really important, because ultimately this is what fills your funnel. And as all these analytics and all this data will feed you at the top of the funnel, and hopefully in the long tail sales cycle that is fund marketing, middle of the funnel, you've just got to hope it all connects all up together. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. And by the end of this process, it leads to investment within your fund. So marketing automation really automates this middle of funnel process, which essentially helps you to do more with less. That's right, more with less. Super. So let's dig into it. Data and marketers. Why doesn't it work? I think most marketers do not have analytic brains. And I've met probably I could probably count on a hand marketers who create great content, who create emotional content, who are creative, that understand typesets, that understand fonts, that understand color, that understand complementary, and all those kind of things, creating that wonderful content that at the same time have an analytic brain that essentially gives you the ability to look at data in a way that you can derive mean, median, mode. You can pull out information around behavior analytics. You can do linear regression, see what's working, what's not working. So when I kind of, 20 years ago, when we kind of built out the product, we were kind of saying, well, how can we build something? And I'm not comparing myself to Steve Jobs, and I'm not comparing myself just because I've got a black turtleneck on, which everybody sees me in. I'm a devotee of Steve Jobs. But Steve Jobs said, give people tools that give them the ability to do great work. And because marketing teams are doing great work, and our ideal customers and marketing teams are doing great work, how can we alleviate the pain of data? And that's really where our product came from. But this is not about really our product. What you want to do as a marketer is focus on creating great content and let tools give the ability to really do the heavy lifting for your data. And the reason for this is because there's so many data points. There are so many data points you're collecting. It's website, it's email, it's social, it's investor portal. So many data points, so many things to get wrong as you're pulling data in from different Excel sheets. There are great tools out there that are available, and one of them is Power BI. And what we've got an example here of a whole set of marketing data. Instead of the marketing person having to collate 7 different spreadsheets, put the data together, have the data out of date, and all that kind of, I think it's like 40 years of Excel now, but there's still the problems remain. And instead of that, having the ability to connect into your various systems and immediately visually see how your marketing is performing. And this is an example where you can actually see whether your website's performing well, whether the social is performing well, email activity, link activity, your inflows, your marketing reach. And all this is what your data scientists in your organization need to be doing, your IT team to generate reports. This is all very much within their wheelhouse. And the beauty of having your data surface in a tool that is like Power BI or Tableau or Gong, or there's loads of visualization tools out there, is as a marketer, you can do your own analysis. And here's an example of that dashboard I just showed you. So here's an example in real time, connecting to real data, where you can actually see your marketing activity and how that ties in to the inflows that are coming into the fund. You've also got the ability to see, okay, globally, what's our reach? And you can actually see globally which countries are more engaged with you, which are less engaged, where your clicks are coming from, and which companies they're coming in. You can then also do things like, okay, which campaigns are having the most traction? And more importantly, you can drill down further and actually see, okay, which funds are people showing more interest in and across which channel? You can even go deeper and I'll come to this, and already somebody's just asked a question around ROI, but how do you build out your ROI models? And again, different people have different ROIs. Now, here are 4 that are probably the most popular that we know. Is one, is your touch rate increasing? Are your prospects more active? Are you generating new opportunities? And are you generating new prospects? So what this allows you to do is very, very quickly get a sense of what's working and what's not working. And again, it is all visual. And there's a reason why people consume information in different ways. And if you're a freak, And if you've got left brain, right brain absolutely firing off in a way that you don't need to visualize data, the really interesting thing is that most CEO type people, weirdly, are visual people as well. And that's why dashboards do so well. And having an interactive dashboard is even better. So again, looking at data itself and the value it brings, being able to take all those multiple data points and being able to, in a visual way, analyze them is incredibly useful, not only for the way that a market consumes data, but in how long it takes to prepare. And if this is actually done well, it's all in real time. Now, a quick plug for what we do. Our data is actually feeding this dashboard, and this dashboard is available in our product. But like I said, it's not about our product, it's about how you visualize data. And if you're using other products, there's no reason why a tool like Power BI or Tableau could connect into that. Okay, so that's it. That's the first part. You know, the phobia of marketers looking for engaging with their investors is like, how do we engage with them? Where do we start? What's working? What's not working? Having something like this is so useful. Okay, so that's that. The data-driven advantage. It's not about, you know, Excel and the math. It's about visualizing data. So with that covered, how do you understand your audience? What is your audience doing with your content? And to understand this a bit more, it runs at two levels. It runs around at the micro level, what are people doing with your content? And at the macro level, what are they doing with your content? So at the micro level, it's all around this concept of investor centricity. Is that all the comms that you're sending out, is it with the investor or the potential investor in mind? Remember, an investor can also be a potential investor as well. And it really is when you're creating content, how are you targeting the interests of your investors and being able to understand what are your investors interested in? The second part is understanding what drives success for your investors. Now, obviously, higher returns is the kind of low hanging fruit element. But that's not it, because investors have different strategies. It could be balancing their portfolio, it could be long-term returns, it could be hedging against other investments they have, it can be wealth protection, it can be a whole raft of things. And the number of marketeers who don't even understand, remember the go-to-market strategy, where they don't even understand, you know, the brand, the fund narrative, it's really then hard to really tie that up to what is termed as success for your investor. And those two have to marry up. And the other part is at the micro level, is be able to take, you know, AI, machine learning, big data. You don't have to learn it, the tools out there that will do that for you, and actually say, what things do we know that will potentially trigger an interest and engagement with this investor? And what you're able to then do at the micro level is take that information and essentially build out a timeline. And what the timeline allows you to do, it allows you within your CRM or within your marketing automation tool to, at the micro level, see the investor's perspective. What have they been engaging with over time? And then using some, I'm going to use the word AI, but it's basically lead scoring that you can see on the left-hand side about engagement and website rating, and using those levers and those signals to actually say, is this individual showing an interest, and then should we then pursue a conversation with this person? And why that ties in really is so important at the micro level, and we've seen this, is that at the end of the day, a marketer, a salesperson, if there's some way that you have a tool or a process that allows a call in a day to be 20% more efficient, then you've over 5 salespeople or 5 relationship managers, you're all of a sudden 100% efficient. You've gained a salesperson. So it's an interesting way of looking at it, and I know a lot of our clients do look at it this way, is how do you gain efficiencies in the calls you're making in a way, again, that's very visual. So that's at the micro level. So at the micro level, it really is about taking the time and effort to have that singular timeline view of the people, the investors, potential investors that you're engaging with. Now, can you do this for your big database? To date, I have not found, and we've got clients who are in the top 10 hedge funds in the world to, boutique managers. If you're hungry enough, you will go through things at the minutiae, because it's a bit like selling locomotives. My best friend in the world sells locomotives for a business, and he says, there are only so many people who are going to buy my locomotives, and there are only so many people that are going to buy your fund. And okay, if you're in the retail side, maybe not, but if you're definitely not on that side, then you probably know that your universe is very small, and you owe it to yourself and your fund to be working in the minutiae, working in the weeds. But that being said, people are going to say, well, actually, how do I know who are the people at the micro level I need to reach out to? And that's when you kind of go up a bit, and then you work at the macro level. And at the macro level, this is where you're kind of using AI to pull out signals for a salesperson. And in this example, we've got an account manager called Sally, and we're basically saying, okay, for Sally, who are the people at the macro level that she should be engaging with? And this is basically using things like, what it's using, I'm going to choke when I say this, machine learning, to essentially tell her, based on the multiple data points in the CRM and in the marketing automation software, who she needs to call, based around, are people low-hanging fruit? Is there cross-selling opportunities? Is there redemption risk? Is there what's called marketing alpha? So who are the people that are actively, who are the people that have not engaged but are suddenly engaging? And what we call audience connect is which people have a journey through the website, through social, that means that they should get a phone call. And this, again, is helping the sales team and the relationship managers and the IR team as well really be in a position where they can target investment and investors and actually knowing who they are. So you kind of move away from a very nebulous, well, this is working, that's not working, this is trending well, that's trending well. There's something of substance. Now, that being said, marketers do need to know what's trending, and that's why pulling out information at the macro level, where you're saying, well, when's the best time to send things out? How many new prospects have we generated? How many are active? How many have we touched? How many new opportunities have we created? What themes are working well across our communication? That is all very, very useful to have. And there are kind of two sides to this. Some funds are very, very keen to handle leads to the salespeople. So that's where the previous slide comes in. While some are introspective as well. They want to know that their marketing is still working, because it's a bit of a chicken and egg. If your marketing isn't working and not trending in the right direction, you're not going to get leads. And as I showed you, 90% of respondents want more leads, better quality leads. So that's it. So that is really the understanding your audience and how do you understand them. It is really about understanding the signals at the macro level and at the micro. So a lot of people and a lot of tools out there and marketing experts, and I think definitely before the pandemic, everyone was talking about we need to personalize our marketing. And that turned out to be all people were talking about is how can we have our marketing in such a way that it feels personal? And that was like, do we show them these articles? Do we say, dear John, dear Sue, dear Sally? What does it mean? Well, personalized marketing, I think in a fund's perspective, has got 4 different arms to it. One is the marketing automation, and that is where you can craft emails and using data sources like Dakota and Preqin to kind of build out sequences of emails, sequences of communications, essentially, where you can basically, based on people's responses, you can send them content, invite them to a physical event, invite them to a webinar, and all the 120 people on this webinar. There we go, your proof of that. So thank you very much. The other thing, old school, direct mail. We're direct mailing people. We've got our clients who are direct mailing because, in marketing automation campaigns, what's the open rate? 10%, 13%. If you're sending it to existing investors, maybe 50% plus. But direct mail is 100% open rate. I mean, who doesn't love to get something in the post other than bills? But it also has a signal that you're worth it. And that's really interesting because when you DHL something or FedEx something, you've gone out of your way to do that. And it signals the value of a relationship, just like when you get a birthday card or somebody writes you a letter. I still keep my thank you card because there is some intrinsic value in the written communication. And Jay Abraham, look him up. He is an old school marketer and he talks about direct mail and how it's still relevant today. The other thing that works is LinkedIn. And I know people roll their eyes up at LinkedIn and the posts and company posts that get no engagement, and rightly so, because nobody cares about the company. But building out a one-to-one engagement with your managers and potential prospects, whether you pull them out from Sales Navigator, is probably one of the most effective ways to use LinkedIn. Direct messaging, don't be cheesy, don't use AI, just write them out by hand. And I know people who've got time in their diary where they make sure they're just doing that reach out. The other part, and when you're doing your reach out, it's really important that you've done some background. Essentially, it's saying, if you're reaching out to an investor, make sure you've read their posts, make sure you've liked some of their posts, make sure you follow them. And even when you're engaging with them, don't just send them a blanket email. Just say, dear Sally, seeing that your fund, see that your fund's been doing this, that you've been investing in this, and keen to know your thoughts. Here's something we put out on ESG or something we put out on, debt restructuring. Hope it's of interest. Give something of value all the time before you actually, ask for a meeting. And pushing down one-to-one meetings, absolutely face-to-face meetings with investors, existing or non or potential. Nothing beats this. And the more and more I talk to people, the more and more I'm finding that people's travel budgets are going up. I spoke to somebody at Etihad the other day who works on the reservation side, and more than half of the A320s that they fly out to the Middle East, half of them are business class, as is from London, as is to New York as well, and Miami. So travel is going up. Confidence in one-to-one meetings is even better. And I know people will hide behind Zoom and because it's easy and cheap to do, but remember about signaling, the cheapest way to connect. Webinars, which I'm doing right now, guilty. But we do run events, physical events in London, Connecticut, New York, and Boston, and next year Chicago. So we do actually go out and see people, but it really is so important going back to the old school way of doing things. So again, it's about differentiating yourself. And I can't, I've got a post on my desk, and it's one post that says keep differentiating in your marketing. Right, so that's personalized marketing. So finally, and we're just a half hour, we've got another 3 minutes to go for half hour. I can see a few questions are coming in, but if you don't mind, I'll take them at the end if that's okay. Here we go. How do you demonstrate ROI? And I know I've pulled this slide up before. It really is, you define ROI however you want to define it. And I'm actually answering the question now, which is what's the best way to measure ROI? I think Some people will look at it as new prospects. So is your mailing list growing? How many are active? How many have touched? How many are new opportunities? It really depends on you. I do think the trends that are more important to be aware of are things like things decay over time, and making sure that you're measuring your engagement ratio on a regular basis in real time if you can. Things like, is your distribution list growing? Are your emails convincing? Is your general content working? Are people getting tired of what you're sending them? That is really, really important when you're measuring ROI. But ultimately, if you are a fund, then it's also worth knowing how you compare with your peer group. And there are services out there. I know FMC from the acquisition of White Marble have a benchmarking tool. For a Funcom, we have a benchmarking tool, just showing you how do you compare against a peer group. But also, ultimately, the way you show value and success is that if marketing is handing sales leads. Because ultimately, if you're demonstrating as the marketing team the impact you're having on raising AUM, that's really where you want to get to. Now, some managers don't see it that way. We've got 400 users, and we would say that is the number one way for a marketing team to get a pay rise, more budget, more resources, demonstrate that you're handing qualified leads. And the way you do that fundamentally is what we call the lead deck, which I showed you earlier on. It's a way that you can find the best way you can to surface leads for the sales team in a way that's digestible to them. Whether that's in an email, an Excel spreadsheet, within the CRM, that's incredibly useful. Super. So there we go. That is 4 steps to drive investor engagement. I'm really impressed is that we've only had 2 people drop off. So hopefully that was engaging. And we've got a whole bunch of questions come through. Let me quickly answer these questions. And there's more. I missed the line. Your voice wasn't clear. Oh, I'm sorry, Sean. Let me quickly go back to that slide. Was it this one, Sean? Yes, a replay will be sent. Right. So this is about handing leads off, is that you can only demonstrate value as a marketer if you are handing leads to your sales team. They're generating AUM from that, because ultimately the only way you can justify pay rises, more budget, more resources to a fund is if you're helping raising assets or if you're preserving assets. Okay, I hope that was useful. Another question come in. Any ideas how to differentiate yourself? A really good question. You differentiate yourself, if I kind of go back to the very, very beginning, is here. And you've got to decide how you differentiate yourself from, and it starts at your brand narrative. What is your fund about? What you do? Who does it benefit? All of that. That's really a key part to differentiate, because people just don't do that. The second part is, once you know your narrative and who you're targeting, it's your brand. And brand in itself has a huge effect on how you're perceived and how you're different. Now, there's a reason why creative consultants exist. And I was always dubious until I met a gentleman called Alan Pitchforth and a few others who really understand the concept of brand and color balancing, typography, and all that kind of stuff. So there's an element there where you differentiate yourself. Then you get into your communication style and the voice that you have. And it's not your CEO's ego, right? That's key. Yes, you can do, founder, CEO-led marketing, but it's far subtle than that. And when you're kind of talking about, doing your demand generation, where you're creating content and pushing it out through channels, is really about, you know, talking about your investment strategy, your attitude to risk, proofing, social proofing, or any proofing around what's worked, what's not worked, with the balance being not being advisory. So that's a challenge. That's something in itself. I think another really good way of that we're finding people differentiating themselves is the channels they're using. So, you know, whether they're running their own events, their own lunches, their own webinars, their own road shows, that differentiates in a huge way. And again, you know, if you follow Jay Abraham's book, again, it just talks about subtle ways to differentiate yourself. And it could be around, you know, dedicated research that you send out. It could be appearing, and we've got clients who work really hard to appear in the Financial Times, on Bloomberg TV, using that content, pushing it out. So, you know, I mean, it really is differentiating, ultimately builds into the science of buying. And, you know, long tail sales cycle is all about, you know, nobody's going to buy your fund because they can't spell, maybe they do, but because it's a long tail sales cycle, because they just saw an article. It's a build up and staying front of mind on a regular basis. And that's why marketing automation is so important in the business that we're in. A way to stay front of mind. Another question is coming in. Do you have any suggestions, again, anonymous, what you should make the subject of an email to make an allocator open it? Weirdly, it's not just the subject line. It's the pull-through text that sits when the email's in preview within a mobile and also within Outlook. So those two are worth doing. When, you know, you're looking at an allocator, so we've looked at some data that we have on standard open rates that we have, subject line analysis. The key with any subject line is that it prompts an action, and the pull-through text that it gives a flavor of what's being discussed. Now, one thing to look at is, if you're collecting this data, is what's worked in the past and what hasn't worked. However, 5 to 11 words is critical. Having no punctuation is also really important. And I think the content of the email is important as well. If it is just performance, then that's all you need to say. If it's a thought leadership piece, then it's around asking a question. And that definitely, we've seen, has an impact. Having a, you know, if it's for an event, having something in there that adds an urgency, like using a word like going live, or, you know, 2 weeks to go, something like that, that creates a sense of urgency. I really wish I knew the answer to this, because I use it all the time, but I would say asking questions and creating some sense of urgency is the art of getting emails open generally. You know, allocators as well. If you know your audience, if you know what's important to your allocator, then that's worth doing as well. But remember, anonymous, it's not just one email. That's what I say. It's a sequence. It's a complete end-to-end process of your go-to-market strategy that feeds into it. So the reason why punctuation isn't important, because if you're using punctuation, your subject line's too long anyway, James. So that's the reason. I had a grammar teacher at school, Mrs. Gerard, who I loved, and she always picked me up on my grammar. But I also think, you know, and at a deeper level, James, people have stopped reading email. They don't read content. Everybody scans, and that's become a real difference in how people engage with content. They're scanning, and that's why if you look at our reports, they're and reports that, you know, I'll clients push out, it's very infographic heavy. It's very chart heavy. It's because people are just at that point now where they're not reading. And I think people of a certain age will read. If it's important, they would read as well. But if they're at the early stage of their interest, they're going to scan. So babbling on about something that they've got some interest in will definitely turn them off. So I'm not saying punctuation is not important. I'm saying the way people are consuming information is different. And to keep the subject line small, short, and punchy, if you're using punctuation, it's already too long. I think the key with all these things is to work out your audience. I think it's also to work out that you are not the most important thing in the world to them. And once you look at it from that perspective, Parking Your Ego, great book, Ego is the Enemy. Read that, that's a good read as well. It actually tells you, how can I be in the space of somebody else and see my communications through their eyes with the behavior that I want from them. So it's not really a marketing thing, it's actually a behavioral science thing. But if you read my book, I kind of talk a little bit about that in there, but Rory Sutherland is also another really good person to follow on that. So hopefully, James, I answered a long question very shortly. Short question in a very long way. How do you, questions come from Anonymous again. How do you get someone to give you an answer on if they will consider you, and suggestions on how you get them to actually allocate you? Ooh, that is, so getting what you're asking there, Anonymous, Anonymous may reveal themselves, is how do you get into the depths of the mind of somebody else? Whether they are going to allocate you, whether they're going to buy you lunch, whether they're going to buy your products, your software, how do you know? And, Carl Jung said that there are reasons people tell you, there are reasons they tell themselves, and there are reasons they do things that they don't even know. And the only way you can really get to those is really by asking good questions. And that is why, and giving, and also being seen to have value. And like I said, you just can't get that over a phone. You've kind of got to build that over time. Now, whether, people are going to, and people will say, is there an AI model that allows you to do that? And absolutely not, because there's not enough data from allocated behavior that allows you to do that. So I think, it's a good point to start is to do the research and kind of say, it's all in the prep, is to kind of look at things like Dakota, Preqin, Broadridge. What are people buying? What have they invested in? What have that fund invested in something similar or not? If what your question seems needy and desperate, and if you are needy and desperate, nobody wants that allocated to somebody who's needy and desperate. And it's almost like you've got to be, appear independently wealthy and freewheeling when you're having these conversations. And a really good person to follow on this is someone called Chris Voss. So if you follow Chris Voss, he talks a lot about he's a hostage negotiator, getting the other side to do what you want them to do. Very, very good, very, very good read. So the book about ego, Natasha, is Ego is the Enemy. It should be taught at schools, and I reread it every year. So that's a very good. So Anonymous also wants to know, where do I get my haircut? Yeah, that's good, Anonymous. I like your style. Right, we've got one more question on, and the last question is how, it's quite a technical one, which is how do we push data into CRM? So I'm assuming how do you push this data into your CRM? Well, the best way to push data to CRM is definitely using your tech guys to have APIs that load this data in. Some CRMs don't have APIs, so you can load this data up using Excel, or you can write some clever stuff using a product called Zapier that will allow you to email salespeople individually, or you can use ProFuncom, your choice. But really, again, like I always say, it's not about the product, it's about the process you have. Harmony has asked a question. How can we think outside the box to attract investors by appealing to factors just beyond returns, such as sector expertise, long-term stability? Well, I think, Harmony, you've answered your question. I think on a regular basis, you've got to be putting out content through multiple channels, talking about the virtues of your fund and doing it on a regular basis, because 90% of people don't read what you send them, so you've got to send it to them in a way that doesn't upset those that read. So that's kind of where marketing automation comes in. So I think it's about creating great content on a regular basis and having it diarized to do it. So we at ProFuncom, and we have a spreadsheet that's available on our website, which is just a diary where you have a content calendar creating content. Now, obviously, if you're a fund, it's different because there's compliance issues, there's regulatory issues, there's non-solicitation, there's jurisdictional issues as well. But with that all encompassed, you still need to be creating these content across multiple channels. And that is, you can do that in Excel and build out from there. Now, you're planning from there. The other thing is also worth looking at is creating content once in long form, as a report, or a manager giving commentary, recording that, sending it to a copywriter, getting it filled out and done and then completed as a transcript, and then splitting that all out through multiple channels. And that's a very cost-efficient way to manage your time. So one bit of content is redeployed in different forms to different channels. And the great news is you can then take all those data points, aggregate them, and then generate leads from there. Okay. Natasha, that's my pleasure. Harmony, I hope that answered your question. And just if we've got any more questions. Wow, we've had about 10 questions coming through. Taking a quick time check. Okay, we're good. Right. I think there's any more. Well, last question I think I'm going to take. Is there any more after this? I'm afraid I will email you separately, so do leave your name behind. What's the best single approach? If there was one single approach to marketing that I have kind of seen over a period of time, there's one thing to do. It would be talk to your existing investors, get them to talk to people that they know. If you want to hack, have an investor lunch in various cities, and investors can come along and they have to bring somebody with them. That's it. Fill a room with investors, potential investors, in something that you control. I think you can go to iConnect and you get all those places. And iConnect won't thank me for this, but one pass to iConnect could probably do 5 investor lunches at some very, very high-end places. If I had one thing to do, forget about ProFuncom, forget about all these digital touch points and technology stacks and stuff like that. Face-to-face, lunch, signal, big signals that people are worth it, that interaction has value. Do it face-to-face. That would be the one thing I would say, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because I'm essentially trying to sell your product. But hopefully it hasn't come across too salesy. Okay, well, thank you to everybody who stayed on till the end. We only had about 10 dropouts, so I hope that was useful. Any questions on the webinar, just send me a message. Also, the replay will go out over the weekend. So thank you all very much. Great weekend. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.